Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Mike Shea at Transworld Business Advisors. This morning, I've got Melissa Barbosa from CPA Orlando. How are you this morning, Melissa?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good. So, Melissa, when did you buy your CPA practice? 2 years ago?
Yeah, about 2.5 years ago. This October will be 3 already.
So she bought it from me. Actually, I wasn't her broker, much to her chagrin, but she did buy it from me. And we've been referring business back and forth since. But I wanted to have her on this morning to talk PPP, to talk bookkeeping, to talk some of the pain that small businesses are experiencing because of either not following advice regarding bookkeeping. So let's kind of start there. Hey, give me a little history of yourself, your educational background, professional background, CPA Orlando's history, and then we'll go into kind of the PPP and the consequences of bad bookkeeping or good bookkeeping.
Okay. Yeah, so as Mike mentioned, I'm Melissa. I'm owner of CPA Orlando. I'm a UCF undergrad, and then I did my master's, my MBA at Florida Southern. I worked in kind of private accounting for a number of years before finally making the leap into public accounting, and that was about 2007. So I've been practicing in public since then. I also have my ABV credential, which gives me the ability to do business valuations. And then as Mike mentioned, I bought CPA Orlando almost 3 years ago, and we work with a lot of small business owners.
And your husband's a small business owner, right?
And my husband is a small business owner himself, yes.
So you live it, breathe it.
Every day, yep.
Every day, right. So, and her practice does do personal taxes, by the way, so don't think it's...
Correct, yep, exactly, yeah. A lot of small business, but also individuals as well.
So we were talking before we got on this video of what's been going on with PPP. So for those who are not, everybody knows about it, but not everybody knows how the associated pain. So why don't you kind of, give some insight on that, what's been going on, and then some of the pitfalls some business owners have been running into.
Yeah. So I think it's been almost 2 months now, we got hit with this pandemic. And so a lot of small business owners just instantly got strapped for cash. Some got impacted right away. Our retail and our restaurant clients, had to just kind of close their doors or weren't able to stay open at full capacity. So the need arose for, hey, I need some sort of assistance. And of course, that first thing is, these government programs came out, the PPP, and then the EIDL, which is the disaster loan, also through the SBA. And obviously they need some sort of financial records in order for you to apply for these programs. And so there's a lot of business owners that are like, I don't have my stuff in order. What do I do? So they're scrambling. These programs are really kind of first come, first serve. We saw with that first round of PPP, the program opened. It didn't even make it 2 weeks before we were completely out of the funds. So you really needed to be first in line and had your stuff in order, ready to go.
So let's kind of pause there for a minute. 2 topics. One is that, you and I both know that it's very common for us to come across businesses that don't have books and records. I routinely, I would say it's probably close to 80% of the time, encounter financial records that are not properly prepared.
Mm-hmm.
The reasons for that are, run the gamut from laziness to trying to play games with taxes or not wanting to pay taxes. No one ever thinks about the end, whether it's a pandemic, death, or an exit, and these tangible assets lose value because we can't get rid of the business. But when you hit the pandemic and they haven't drawn a salary on the books or shown a profit, the net effect is they can't get the PPP, right? Because there's no record, no 941, no W-3 to prove that they ever paid wages.
Yeah. So, yeah, that would be like our S-Corp owners. They're the prime example, and they should be paying themselves a wage, but a lot of them aren't. And then this program came out, and you're exactly right. They didn't have the payroll records.
And then strapped for cash. You made a point. I interviewed Courtney Wood the other day, the financial planner, and she went off on this tangent. Real smart. She's young. She's under 30, but she said, you should have 6 months to a year nest egg for personal, and then the same for your business. Now the business can change. I always talk about how much we should have in reserves, but she was like, you've got to have a nest egg because something's always going to go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you pointed out that they were strapped for cash. How much do small business owners usually have on reserves? And then conversely, what should they have?
Yeah. not many of them have reserves that I come across. I mean, but I agree with Courtney. I mean, I would say at least 3 months, if not 6 months. I think 6 months is a much better cushion, but
Yeah.
3 at the absolute minimum.
Yeah, and it's a mind-boggling problem. So I get like, the corporate types will sit there and go, "How's that possible?" Because they always have reserves on the balance sheet. And I'm like, it's just fundamental discipline to know that there's money, in retained earnings on your bank account sitting there, and you always think tomorrow is going to come, and then something like this happens, and you don't have reserves to weather the storm, and then you're struggling. So I know in my industry, there's lots of brokers who are struggling because they make a commission, they spend the commission, and they're chasing the next deal, and they're in this constant cycle of how do I operate? And then what ends up happening is something gets cut. Labor gets cut, advertising gets cut, something gets cut in order to kind of stay alive for a period of time. But the reality is you're bleeding out, right? So, you're recommending they should have 3 to 6 months of reserves at all times. And that's a no touch, that's an emergency fund, that's the pandemic fund. So one major takeaway from the pandemic is learn your lesson and build up your reserves again, right?
Correct.
Okay, so cool.
Yeah. And then otherwise, if you don't have that reserve, you're obviously going to have to go get financing for it. Well, you need your books in order so that you can get that financing.
Right. So if you so that's the other thing. Then they'll go to the bank and they'll drive up in their Mercedes, and the bank's going to ask for their tax returns, their financial statements that have been, prepared by a CPA. And if you don't have those, you can't get your lines of credit. So it's chicken or the egg. So the business owners always like point at everybody else like it's somebody else's fault. It's like, you needed to do this, right? You needed to have a CPA or an accountant. You need to prepare it. And then that leads to, they always tell me bookkeeping is this painful thing or it's hard. Is it?
No, it doesn't have to be. And at the end of the day, you can always hire someone to do it for you. If you don't have the time to it, or it's just not your forte.
Is it because they don't understand the value?
As far as hiring someone, do they not understand the value?
No, I mean, like, why do you find they don't? I mean, I always turn people over to you, and like, what are the common, like, you see the eyes glaze over? Is it because we talk over their head, or they don't understand the why?
It's usually, I'm just not a numbers person. I never was really into math, and it never ceases to amaze me the number of business owners that they know their cash flow in their head. They don't do, they're not reconciling their accounts every month, but they know what they've got on tap. Which you can operate some time like that, but eventually something's going to get missed. And if you're trying to do any sort of projections, you can't.
That's true, because it's funny. I'll get a set of books, and if they're garbage, I'll just throw them aside and go, okay, what do you think you're making? And 99.9% of the time, the owner intuitively knows, because what they're doing is they're working off their bank statement.
Yeah.
And they may get hung up on what bucket on the T account it goes. Does it go to a credit? Does it go to a debit? And all that other stuff. They don't need to know that. But they need to have the records, because the money's being given to them by the feds. The government isn't just going to give them money because they said so.
Correct.
And you're not going to go get on TV and lament and cry, because then when they go, hey, I have never paid taxes, but give me 3 months of the PPP money, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. There's always that second story. And then, as a consequence on the exit, if they have a big business and they've never paid taxes, the buyer's going to look at, there's no books, buyer can't judge. And more importantly, you can't get the money to purchase, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't look credible. If you can't, hand over clean financials and tax returns, and ideally they should tie, if you can't hand that over, just that lowers your credibility.
Yeah. So how would you, what do you do for a small business owner that makes it easy for them? Let's pick your husband's business, right? So
he has it the easiest.
Well, yeah, he just throws it at you. But take the average, that's a typical, like a small business starter business, and there's hundreds of them, and they're notorious for it. So how easy is it for a bookkeeper? Like, I met a guy once in Kissimmee who had an iPad, and every time he had a credit card, he would just go get gas, he'd punch the entry into the iPad, or you put it on your phone, and it would download into Quicken. He was using Quicken. Which isn't the best, but he was using something.
Yeah.
And his ins and outs were right there, all tied to the bank statement. It produced a financial statement. And I was like, God, why doesn't everybody do that? And because it becomes the discipline of, and then the other one is, say they get to about your husband's size, right? What should they be doing? Like, how do you handle your husband's books?
Yeah, so with him, I use QuickBooks. I mean, there's so many different accounting software packages out there. Of course, QuickBooks is the big dog, but there's others, Wave, FreshBooks, Xero, and so forth. But really, it's just having that accounting software program in place, and like you said, getting that system going. It's going to be a little bit more time on that front end, getting everything set up. But once you've got, you link your credit card accounts to it, your bank accounts to it, and really make it a kind of a seamless approach. I mean, that's really just it, getting that system in place.
Right. And then, I've seen some accountants charge like crazy dollars for financial statements. And like, you were making that comment that the business owner knows their cash flow. The important thing isn't that they're producing a P&L every month necessarily, because most business owners don't look at it, but they should have a CPA who's talking to them. I recommend at least quarterly, make a phone call, review the financial statement, and have them break it down in layman's terms. So I think part of it is that I'm not a math person, or I don't understand that. It's like, look, I failed account. I mean, I took accounting twice in college. I hated it because I wasn't a numbers guy, which is ridiculous given what I do for a living. And it was the way that it was being taught. I wasn't understanding it. And then when I got to the corporate world, someone just broke it down like balancing a checkbook.
Yeah.
This is how it works. And I went, I got it.
Yeah.
The language doesn't matter. So sometimes they get hung up on that. So you're really good at kind of making it simple.
Correct. Yeah. I like to always break it down. I always tell them, it's like, there's no stupid questions. It's like, we'll go over this line by line. I would say one of the most common areas I get with business owners is, like you said, they know cash flow. And so you get to the end, you're doing your tax return, and then they've got this income and they're like, I didn't make that. Like, where'd that come from? I know what the money is. And so like one common area is if they do have debt and they're making all these payments on the debt, in their mind, that principal, they don't have that cash because it's going out, but it's not a deduction to you for tax return purposes. So you're actually going to show some income. So that's a very common one I'm always having to explain.
Yeah, because the assets on the balance sheet, it's an asset, right? And it's funny you bring that up because Courtney that was the second thing Courtney was hammering is like debt is bad. Debt's bad. And you should run your business so it self-funds itself, either through reserves or your payment. And that's one of the things a good CPA can do is like, you can look at I put a tip out the other day that I had learned 25 years ago about billing cycles. Like when I was in the bottled water business, I came across a competitor who billed every 28 days. And, I tell that to some guys in the lawn business particularly, because it's an annuity business, right? And I would go, look, if you bill every 28 days, how many times does 28 go into 365? That's not big math. That's third grade math. Right? And they're like, okay, that's 13. I go, yeah, you just got a 13th month of billing. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. I go, that you just increased your profit by X. Well, is that dishonest? I go, no, because there's 5-week months, there's 4-week months, and there's February, which is an anomaly in and of itself. And you work every week, you should be billing on a weekly basis. So that's not out of whack. You just made it simple for people at 12 and you're actually losing money on that. Now, unwinding that's a challenge, but why I share that story is the relations of cash flow and sometimes the accountants, because how many clients do you have?
I don't know my exact number account. I probably should know that.
Thousands, right? And
yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, and you get to look at thousands of different businesses, and I get to look at thousands of different businesses, so that those operators need to have a relationship with their CPA who is pointing things out. Too often it's just once a year, I don't want to pay taxes. And it's never, okay, let me explain what you're doing wrong on cash flow. There's got to be that respect with your CPA that they actually can add value and help you. Sometimes you can spot things in terms of purchasing. Like if they go buy a truck or a rig, they damn well better ask you.
Yeah.
And they damn well better go, can I afford it? What's the net impact to my cash flow? How's this going to hurt me on taxes? Do I put it on a balance sheet? Do I expense it? Those conversations need to be had before you make those decisions.
Exactly. Yes.
And that doesn't happen.
Nope, it does not. So, and then that's what I tell them. There's only so much I can do for you at that point when you reach, contact me after the fact. So. Right.
It's kind of like, don't bitch about having cancer if you've smoked cigarettes and ignored your doctor. Right.
Good analogy,
yeah. And it's always funny, they come to me and I'll look at the books and I'm like, why did you do that? And they go, I don't know. Well, who's your CPA? They'll tell me. And I go, how often do you talk to them?
Hmm.
Once a year, or I just send the stuff in, they prepare the return. There's no dialogue going back and forth. And then, as it relates to my world, you should be, your CPA relationship should be one like it is with your financial planner, where you're worrying about that asset, as a liquidatable asset tied into your financial plan. Because then your financial planner, because we were talking with Courtney about pensions, 401ks, and SEPs, right? And which one's right for which type of circumstance and when, right?
Hmm.
If you're younger, you can use a different vehicle because you have more time. If you're older, you may need to be more aggressive, and that may mitigate the amount of cash flow you have to run your business, right?
Hmm.
And that's a dynamic. The balance of running your business, growing your business, and then saving for retirement. Those three things have to work in unison, and your CPA and your financial planner need to work together.
Correct. Yep.
And that's another thing that the small business owners kind of blow over, like, I got till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
this shit hits.
Yep.
Right. And they're like, okay, you just lost 6 months. You got to start over again. How are you going to do that?
Hmm.
And you have no reserves. And those reserves, on the Courtney side, I was trying to bantering back and forth with her on the challenge of small business owners having lines of credit.
Hmm.
Because of the way they prepare their books. They're self-funding operations, which goes back to your earlier point of, if your books suck, you can't go to the bank to get the line of credit.
Hmm.
So therefore you can't save for retirement. So therefore you start not paying taxes because you played with bad books, which then leads to, you can't sell it for what it's worth.
Exactly.
And then you're working till you die, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. It all circles back. You just need to get your books in order.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind
It's
of
funny when we do, our presentations and speaking engagements, we go our top 10 things, right?
Hmm.
Books and records is 1, books and records is 5, books and records is 10.
Yeah.
And yet we still can't seem to move the needle on getting people prepared.
Yeah.
So top things, that business owners should do during COVID, the current crisis, and then your website, phone number, et cetera, and we'll wrap this one up.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, just right now, if your books aren't already in order, you need to get them in order with everything that's going on. If you were one of them that got one of the loans, of course, you need to make sure you're got everything in order so that you can apply for the forgiveness on the PPP.
What's that look like? How's the forgiveness work?
That's a good question. The SBA has given some limited guidance in that area, but it's very limited. So we're hoping to see something in these next couple weeks, because I think a lot of people are kind of at that 3rd or 4th week mark. So another 4 weeks out, they're going to be applying for the forgiveness. And we really don't have enough guidance yet on how that's going to play out.
One thing I've been telling them is they got to keep that money in a separate bank account. So
that's been a guidance. Yeah. Yeah. I struggle with my opinion on that one, because I think it could be overly burdensome to make a business owner do that. Because you think of, the biggest expense with these funds is going to be payroll, of course, but it's only your gross wages. It's the same exact wages that were used in calculating the loan amount is the same amount that you're going to apply for forgiveness.
Right. But that assumes you've got clean books and that's all tracked.
Correct. Yes. Hey, look at, we're circling back again. Clean books.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But that is one kind of general requirement that was put out there. Is that something they're going to withhold? I don't know at this point. So
okay,
we shall see.
Yeah. And so they get their PPP, 4-6 weeks later, they got to apply for that forgiveness. And then that's making crazy time for you. So you're just spending time fielding phone calls, doing PPP payrolls. And it's not easy. That website is not user-friendly.
No, not at all. So right now, we're just doing the best with the guidance that we do have, and, projecting the monies out the best we can and see what comes. Well,
thanks for doing this. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. So my website's cpaorlando.net. Phone number is 407-657-5440. Probably website's the easiest way. All the contact information's there.
So it's not just you. You've got a bunch of people in there with you, right?
Yeah, I've got three others with me right now. So not a bunch. So we're definitely a small firm. We provide that personalized service. Nobody's working with the same individuals. So.
Yeah, but real organized. super smart, like on the valuation piece.
Mhm.
For people who don't know what that means like you go into court, right? And
Correct. Yeah. The majority of the valuations that I've done have been for estate planning purposes, marital dissolutions, yeah,
so
shareholder buyouts.
yeah, so when we start, I don't do a lot of that stuff, but when I do, they kick it over to her. She's qualified to do that stuff.
Mhm.
And then when you want to divorce your husband and take his money, you hire people like her to go in there and come up with the number.
Yep.
And then they hire me to go, that's nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And then we go all circular again. All right.
Yep.
Thank you so much, and stay
You're
safe.
welcome. Yes. Same to you. Have a great one.